Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about ideas and current events. I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke.
Together we explore the underlying connections and root causes of 21st century life so that we might discover what is really true and, in the process, develop an antiviral mindset in the culture of spiritual decay, moral disease, and mental domination.
You have been playing with that intro.
I did.
21st century.
I tweaked it. I know, I threw in 21st century.
Antiviral mindset. Okay.
Well, it's for now. That's what, because, I noted last time when we talked about the antiviral mindset that is particularly important today. Well, it's not as important as it has always been.
Okay. Yeah. I just think, we're called On Second Thought, but that might be the 10th thought we've given to that.
Well, you don't know how long I worked on it. I had spiritual decay. I like that idea. That's really what's happening.
Yeah.
And moral disease. I really like that, especially the antiviral. But there's this mental component. We're being gaslighted all the time. I had dishonesty, but I was looking for a D word. What is a D word for? Devastation, destruction, deconstruction, but dominion. I don't really like domination as much. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well, but there's this attempt to dominate us mentally. Here's what's true.
I feel like most of the domination
can't have babies.
I feel like most of the domination, there's that frontal attack, but then there's the chaos all around you, the distraction. It's not just distraction, it's confusion.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And it has its own domineering aspect as well.
I agree. In fact, so it's so interesting. I meet with a group of guys and we read Greek together, and once a week just to keep up the rust. If you don't keep up with Greek, whatever you learned in seminary or whatever, it goes away. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we were reading yesterday the stories about Jesus healing the man with the dried up hand.
Yeah, so he's in the synagogue on a Sabbath, and he's not supposed to do this, and he's sort of like at this standoff with the church leaders.
It's in three of the things, and the one that was made me stand out was the Luke version, where it says they were talking amongst themselves, the Pharisees, and we end up finding out that it's the Herodians there as well. And they're saying, well, is he going to heal on the Sabbath? They're jabbering. And it says Jesus, knowing what they were saying, he asks the man to stand up. And then he looks around. The word is in a circle. He looks around in a circle and says, is it lawful because they were saying it's unlawful. Is it lawful to do good or to do harm?
Right.
To save a life or to destroy a life? And then he looks around, the word peri, and looks around, and nobody answers.
I feel like there should have been a cricket sound effect right in that moment.
Yes, that's exactly right. But what it made me think of was our current situation of elites. Yeah. Because everyone in that room, except for the Pharisees and Herodians, obviously doing good. It's common sense.
Right.
But they are in, and what I realize is it's the role of power. They are in a position of power in which it is to their vested interest to make this conflict. And now they're occupying a place which nobody believes.
Right.
And Jesus is throwing it out in the middle of them. They're gaslighting everybody 2,000 years ago that the Sabbath, they built this up and you can't heal this man. And Jesus, and one of the other illustrations I think in Mark is, guys, if your own sheep fell into a pit, you'd pull it out on the Sabbath. Right. You know instinctively that this is right. That's what's happening.
There's a debate strategy there, and it also reminds me of a concept. The debate strategy is the either or. You sort of set them up you could almost argue it's a false choice, except that if you have the power to set someone free and you don't, then it really does come down to doing good or doing evil, right? Versus the third way would be, well, it's not up to us, right? His hand is shriveled, that's not our fault. But Jesus not only clearly lives as if he has power over those things, but expects the leaders to have that power too, if he's giving them that do good or do evil choice.
That's true. I was thinking of it more in terms of how power makes it so you defend the indefensible. And you end up out on a limb, and because you have power, you're creating a reality that you expect everyone else to submit to, but they don't believe it.
Well, and it's also shocking to me how quickly they accept the paradigm of Jesus doing these incredible miracles, right? It's almost as if, that's to be expected,
they know
even though it's unusual.
Also.
Right?
I know it.
But then immediately, knee-jerk reaction, let's put constraints, let's rule let's make rules about it.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing I think about with that in terms of Jesus is I have a strong impulse, and almost everyone I talk to about it does, to avoid that kind of head-on conflict, right? And I think part of our training in evangelism, is
I agree with you.
really perpetuates that,
Yes.
like, let's find
Winsome.
another way to say
Yeah,
this that's
yep,
not
yep.
direct and in
Yeah,
your face. And Jesus
yeah.
is just right in their face.
Well, he is, and yet it's also it is he's for the right people. He's not anti the Pharisees in the moment. He's
Right.
for the man. And that makes him angry with what their position is.
Yep.
That's different than being the person who likes to attack. The other thing I noticed about that story when we were reading it yesterday in relation to the elites today and mental domination is the role of people, the value of people. So these people got in power and they want to protect the Sabbath and not people.
Right.
Which is so interesting because that's what you want to. People want to protect animals and not people. You save a baby. I mean, kill a baby, but save a seal or save a dog or a puppy.
Yeah. Right.
We're going to save the climate change. We're going to do this, but we're going to destroy human industry and the ability to have enough food and clothing and shelter.
Right.
We're going to blow up a gas line because we're going to save the planet, but we're going to kill the people in the process. And Jesus' whole point is the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And we do the same thing with all these other pieces.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what it is? It's at the heart of the broken mankind is a part of us hates humanity. We hate people. They're made in God's image. We want to destroy. And so when we get power, then we begin to make constructions destroy. Anyway.
That's interesting.
Well, what about an opening? How are you doing this morning? It's the morning time.
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
We are in our autumn break at school. So we get 4 weeks off after each term. So we got a week left after this week, and then we'll be back for fall term. So our school doesn't start normal early September.
Nice.
We actually get off of school from our summer term last week of August and take 4 weeks off.
Yeah.
So enjoying a
We
little
haven't
break.
recorded since the 4th, so we're a little back, and our notes are long and fast. And so
I know.
I'm going to try to not speed us through, but we're going to try to be efficient. What do you got here? A married young, Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah, the Dread Pirate Roberts. So I have this idea. One is that the most romantic movie ever made, I think, is The Princess Bride. But
okay.
one of the ideas that I thought about in that, because I see a lot of Christian guys that I follow who are hinting at or even outright recommending to young men to just get married. Like, you don't need to go through all this rigmarole of finding yourself and even your career. I mean, I think you have to be able to get a job that can support children.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't be getting married.
Yeah.
But my sons are growing up. My oldest is in his senior year of high school, and so making some decisions and thinking about, my advice to him thus far has been like, hey, if you're not even in the realm of getting married, dating is probably a waste of your time. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. This is true of married people too, but the high schoolers, they get a girlfriend and they immediately want him to have a girlfriend. So then there can be the foursome that goes around and has fun together.
Yeah.
And he's successfully avoided that so far. But I even feel it, watching him thinking like, oh, I noticed this girl at church that he might, like, I wonder if he know. But in The Princess Bride,
Yes.
Wesley is the main character, and he's the farm boy, and he is just obedient to whatever the girl that he loves desires, right? As you wish was the famous phrase.
Yeah.
And it dawns on me, that people take that to be really romantic. I kind of don't. Mm-hmm. And it dawns on me that the authors didn't either, because in order for him to actually be the romantic interest of this incredible woman, he has to first go and become something dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. To become a pirate even, a killer, so that he can then legitimately rescue her from evil.
Yeah.
And so part of the advice that I'm forming in my head is for my sons to go out and find that pirate, right? To become something significant, to know that you can have real conquest, and from real conquest, even if you're just conquering yourself, comes real confidence.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've often thought about the humor point of the girl likes the bad boy biker kid, in college or high school that he wouldn't bring home to mom and dad.
Yeah.
But there's a certain thrill. And then the other picture that's right next to it is the girl who wants safety, who has children, don't speed, honey, don't do crazy things, right? And so she's a little bit at war with herself. But my fundamental belief is that while she's geared towards safety and security, she likes the element of danger and adventure that comes from this man, even though it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Without it, she would get bored and become manipulative and be in control and not be happy.
Well, and the other
But
side
the
is
other is a little fearful still.
the world is scarier still.
Yes, that's exactly
And so
right.
if you're going to have a protector who has no fearfulness to him,
Yeah. And this
What
is
good
the
is he?
Aslan thing, right?
yeah.
With the beavers.
Right.
Is he
is he
dangerous?
a tame lion?
No, but he's good.
Right, right.
He's not safe at all.
Yeah.
And that's how God made the world. It is not safe, but that we only think of safe as bad, and there is a place for safe to be good, but the thrill of life that God made into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I totally agree with that. And I thought you were going to do a little something different with that. What do you have here on divorce culture? And
Well, this was something that's been churning around in pop culture and in the debates that I follow around a lot of young women getting divorced in their 20s or early 30s or never marrying and sort of celebrating that as their sense of empowerment. And the debate is whether, that is, if they actually are happy, if they've convinced themselves they are.
Yeah.
And, there certainly are people who live easier lives who find joy in that.
Yeah.
But the idea that I think about with it is you've got to build something that will last, right? And even a job, no matter how successful you get in that job, you'll be replaced within a week.
Yeah. You're not as important as you think.
Once you're gone.
Yeah.
So you didn't really build anything. Even the titans of industry who build massive corporations, they last for decades and then they fade away, right?
That's right.
The heroes of 20 years ago in the corporate world, their corporations, not only they are gone, their corporations are diminished, right?
Yeah.
But the other side of that too is there's an economic incentive for the people who fund our culture, right? So the investors, the bankers, the Wall Street people. It was an incentive to get women into the workplace after World War II so that there was more taxes. More work means more taxes. Yeah. More taxes means bigger government, right? Bigger government, more programs, and on it goes. And so now for the most part, you have two-income families as the dominant norm, right?
Yeah.
Supermajority or beyond. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is stop spending that money on your kids or having kids. It slows you down. You take time off, right? And so everything is incentivized around economic gain.
Yeah.
And people want to blame this on capitalism. I don't know if it is or not.
Yeah.
I see because when I studied the Soviet Union, when I went to former Soviet states, that was the message they had too. I remember we were doing high school outreach in Latvia in the early 2000s. They'd only been out of Soviet control for a decade at that time. The high schoolers were raised by the government. These kids in their early years growing up, the parents were literally encouraged, if not required, have your kid and then drop them off and go back to work so the mom can work too for the state, right? But it's the same outcome with a different supposed inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I see is it's a constant degradation of the moral fabric.
Yeah.
So we can say, well, it's dad's, it's this, dad's absent or it's the moral decline, but it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
It's a country, I think, that's lost its vision of what's good and what's
And I think
beautiful.
what ends up happening is we bring corruption to all of our thoughts. And so whenever we have things that we do, we degrade them over time. It's in human nature. You have to fight to not degrade them.
That's
I
right.
was thinking about work. This is a thought I've been having for quite a while now. And the whole phrase about don't be anxious for anything. And Jesus says, look at the birds of the air. They don't toil, they don't reap and sow, and their Father cares for them. And I was thinking about that a lot, how contrary to our basic thought about work is. And I thought, the problem is our basic thoughts about work are wrong. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
And so we struggle to, if it's not along the lines of storing and reaping and sowing and building storage and securing against the future, well, what in the world is it for? And we can't even conceive what it could be. And I've created this thought that's just germinating that maybe we have approached work, even work, in a false way, as if it's supposed to secure all these things, and God says, no, I do that for you.
Yeah.
Work is more actually like play. Go and do what you enjoy, and there's going to be things you don't enjoy, and you are going to get paid for it, but the motivation is to do it as play unto service and enjoying the world.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, you will also get paid, and you'll care for your future. You'll do these other things that are there, but they're not the primary drivers, because these birds don't think about it at all. Look at them, he says. Consider them.
They're not
Think
worried
about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't worry about it. And I just think it's very difficult for us to uncorrupt our thoughts.
Well, it's a result of the fall, right? The curse of toil
that's
upon good work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking around work and toil and burnout in particular. What causes someone to say, I'm done with this, I never want to do it again? Maybe something they're really successful at. And watching, I remember as a teenager, I joined the swim team, right? And there was a kid on the swim team who was several years younger than me, who was, I think, in middle school when I was in high school. So I was graduating high school. And all the talk was that he was going to qualify for the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
He was a star. And halfway through high school, he just quit. And the more I've studied it, the more I've come to see that the reason that sort of thing happens is because all your sense of value, right? And thus insecurities, right? Because your identity gets, your insecurities poison everything. They poison the work. And so what is the toil except that you say, I'm going to put my hand to making myself like God. Right? I'm going to make myself excellent. I'm going to make myself someone who matters. And then that poisons the thing you actually try to go out and do.
Exactly. It destroys it, actually.
And on the opposite side of that, the most fun and hardest work I've ever done was work that I was completely convinced God told me to do. It was just a joy. And it was hours and hours, and it was hard work, but it was just like, this is what I was made to do.
The old guys would have brought in the role of idolatry, that things become idolatrous. We disproportionate them. What's something that should be 4 rungs down in importance, we put it up at the top or the second. And
all right. I have a question about this, because this has been a popular, right? I don't know if it's 2003 is when I started hearing the word idolatry used a lot. But I struggle to find a real definition. Because I see people saying, oh, you spend too much time with your kids, it's an idol. And it's like, whoa, that's kind of weird. So what is the actual, like when you've heard people say, or maybe, I've said it too, this has become an idol. What do we actually mean?
Well, obviously it comes from the old imagery of something being bowed down to, deity, which we believe is a fallen being who was meant to do good, but has now claimed the role of God and wants to be the one. And so the Baal, for example, says, I bring the wind. And God in the prophets over and over says, no, I'm the one who brings the wind. And they have a role, but they wanted it to be distorted. They wanted to be up in the supreme place. And so then the New Testament takes that over, and particularly at the end of John's epistles, when he says, keep yourselves from idolatry. And what he's not meaning bowing down to Moloch or Baal, because that has not been happening anymore in this area of the world. What he's meaning is the same thing displaced into non-seen images.
So in the time when John is writing his epistle, there's still a lot of what I would call superstition idols.
Yes,
is
Diana
that right?
is being worshipped.
So we got to go pay our thing, and if things don't go well for us, if business deal, the weather doesn't turn out, it's like, oh, I should have given more.
Blamed because they were atheistic in Corinth, and they helped create the famine that came.
Right.
Things like that. Yes.
So what I like to do is categorize it as like, okay, so if I'm looking for someone above me to provide or protect, kind of like a fatherly role. That would become an idol.
That's correct.
But I assume it has to have a personification.
No.
Okay, tell me more about that.
I think what it is if you view a hierarchy of allegiances, things you owe, which we all do. So you owe something to God that you don't, more than you owe to your wife. You owe something to your wife more than even your kids. You owe something to your kids more than to my kids, etc. You can build a fairly recognizable thing of 5, 6, 7, or 8 that almost everybody would probably agree with. Right? That would be undisputed. And so there is a hierarchy. It's when we displace those and take something that's supposed to be a 5 or 6 or 4 and we put it up at 2 or 3.
So it's just a priority list.
It's a prioritization. And so where it becomes the issue is that God is supposed to be the top. And when you talked about, for example, the Olympic guy, and you begin to get your identity and meaning and significance, things God is supposed to give you. And now you're doing it from swimming, which is somewhere down 5, 6, 7, obviously his family is supposed to be above that, et cetera, et cetera. But it's pretty high for his individual life, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But now he has not recognized that what he's been doing is he's actually nudged it up to the one spot. My significance and value. And now he loses a race. He was not feeling something, and it crushes him and defeats him.
So let me connect this to
God
something,
has
right?
fallen.
Because there's some research done that I find really persuasive around this type of burnout in particular. And it is that the praise that we give to our kids or that we give to each other, if it's around intrinsic things, we've talked about this recently.
We did.
Yeah. So if your praise is, man, you're so talented, for example.
Yeah.
And the way we use the word talent is to mean it wasn't yours, right? You were given
Like
it.
saying you're a great left-handed kid.
Well, no, more like saying there's something about you that you didn't create,
Yeah,
that you
that's what I
can't
mean.
make.
You don't make yourself left or right-handed.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
But if you work at making a rocking chair and
Yeah.
you smooth it out and you do work that is not talent-based or just a gift given to you, but
Yeah.
you produce something with it, that's where you're aiming, right?
Right. There's a really famous study of a bunch of fifth graders. They were given math tests, and half of them at random were chosen, and the sentence was read to them. It was an easy test, right?
Yeah.
They read the sentence, "You did a good job. You must have worked really hard."
Yeah.
This other half, "You did a good job. You must be really smart."
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
see what they want to do next. So they're given another test. This test is much harder, and they're
Yeah.
expected to do poorly.
Yeah.
And then what are the choices once they're faced with failure?
Yep.
And it was a really stark difference
Yeah.
that the kids who were told that intrinsically you were smart, beautiful, talented, right? Things you can't control, but that are intrinsic and identifiers. Those kids wanted to then avoid failure going forward.
Yes, that's right.
Let's go back to that easy work.
Yeah. I
Right.
totally
And
agree
that
with you.
creates a culture of burnout when you prioritize.
That kind of praise is in line with an idolatrous mindset. It might not be idolatry in itself, but it is really underneath it the same thing. Because you are praising them for something that they didn't do or give. It was given to them. It's not worthy of praise.
So is it that the parent in that moment or the coach or the teacher or whomever is making an idol out of the kid?
That could be.
I mean, that sort of makes sense, that there's something about you that's so incredible.
And in addition, I think that's true, but in addition, I think you could also say, and this is what Calvin said, we are idol factories. Our fallen humanity, we make them by nature. And so that advice flows out of what is the most common sense thinking.
Well, so here's the struggle I've had with the idolatry term.
Yeah.
At first when I heard it, because I remember growing up reading the Old Testament thinking there's all this idolatry now, today there's none. Where did it go?
Yeah.
And then the first time I heard someone preach about it, I think it might have been John Piper, I was like, oh, of course, it's everywhere, right? And it was sort of like helped connect the dots.
Yeah.
But then as I started to listen to pastors use this terminology more and more, as it kind of the idea spread around, it became like, well, this family doesn't get involved in church. It must be that they have an idol of something else.
Yes.
And you're like, well, maybe, or maybe they just have a really rich life and church is part of it, but not all of it, right? And there's always this handful of families who are the center of church activity. And then it creates a hierarchy of
But you're
who's
talking
the most.
the accuracy of application.
Well, that's why I'm saying I want a definition.
Yeah.
I want to say, okay, if you've got your priorities out of whack and you're traveling every weekend to play club sports, right?
Yeah.
And you're in some vague hope that your kid's going to get a D1 scholarship. You've really changed life. You've got your priorities wrong. But I don't know that just because your priorities wrong, that means you have an idol. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I feel like we've taken this really powerful term and diluted it. And I don't know if we can solve that today. But
probably not. Okay. Subscription. Hey, if you like what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
If this is interesting to you, there's a few things you can do. Number one, the biggest and most important thing would be this. Hey, we're talking out loud and you're listening. We're just at a coffee shop and you're at another table. And you're listening into our conversation. That's the way we do it. We really don't try to talk for you to listen in, but we know people are listening in. But the encouragement would be, go and talk with other people. Raise interesting questions.
Yeah.
Ask somebody else about idolatry. What do you think?
Yeah,
What do you think it
is it?
means?
What is
These are great conversations. This is how we develop antiviral mindsets, is by engaging with other people about interesting things.
I like
You
it.
can also like and rate us with whatever media you're looking at us through. You can recommend and share this video or this audio and recommend it, and those are all good things to do.
Okay.
All right.
Well, hey,
Go ahead.
I wanted to jump into one that connects to where we started.
All right, go.
We were talking about conflict and Jesus in the synagogue and the guy with the
I didn't
shriveled
mean
hand.
to share that, but yeah.
But what it reminded me of, the one you wrote about, is bullying ever good?
Oh, okay, let's
Right?
ask that question.
So the example you
I knew
give is
you'd like that
Elijah
question.
mocking the prophets of Baal.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some experience around the topic of bullying.
Yes,
right?
I understand you do.
And a lot of interest in it. I think it's a really important topic, but is often misunderstood. So when we would talk to kids about it, we'd say there's rudeness, there's meanness, and there's bullying, and it's sort of an escalation.
Rudeness, meanness, and bullying.
Yeah, so
Okay,
someone
I
can
see
be
this difference
rude
there.
means that they
Not even intending to necessarily.
That's
but-
right. They were just not thinking of you.
That's right.
Maybe they're selfish or they're distracted, but
Yeah,
they were rude.
yeah. I could
Okay.
interrupt you and go on my own track, and I could be rude.
That's right.
In a sense, just self-centered.
And it's a good way to teach politeness is that you're thinking of others and trying to show them
makes
that they
sense.
matter, right?
right.
So the opposite of politeness is kind of disrespect.
Yeah.
Okay. So then meanness is, I actually want to hurt your feelings,
Okay.
right? I'm being mean.
Yeah. Say something. I'm
Or maybe I'm trying to dominate you,
Sure.
right? Bossiness is kind of mean, that kind of thing. And that's common among littler kids.
Yeah.
That bossy, who's in charge of me. But neither of those is ever bullying. In order to be bullying, and what we would call it is targeted aggression, we would say you need to be in a position of either social or physical or...
Well, wait, when you said targeted aggression,
Yeah.
that's kind of what you said about being mean. I want to hurt your feelings.
Right, but it has to happen over a pattern of time.
Okay.
Right, so I'm not just mean to you because you walk by.
On an occasion.
I'm targeting you for meanness, and every time I see
You
you.
got a plan.
That's right. And not
Okay.
and the key dynamic to it is that there's a hierarchy difference. That the person above is targeting for aggression someone below. So in this sense, you have to be in a position of power. Maybe you're the best athlete. Maybe you're the best student in math. Maybe you're the most socially dynamic person. For whatever reason, you are above someone else and you say, I'm going to make them suffer. That's what real bullying is. And it comes with this. Even when you describe it, you get this sense of like, oh
So
yeah,
it's a
that's
power
really
lust
wrong.
in a sense.
It is, and it's sort of an enjoying destroying the weak in particular, right?
Yeah.
And so Elijah in this story, in the prophets of Baal, or Jesus in the synagogue, it can't be bullying in either case because they're actually going after the people that are above. So Jesus is going after the elites. Elijah is going after not just the prophets of Baal who outnumber him by hundreds, but also the whole power structure of the monarchy in his nation.
Okay, so wait, let me ask you this then. What you're saying when you said that is that bullying by definition has to have a power differential.
Correct.
There has to be an above and below.
Yep, a weak and a
So
strong.
what you're saying, there's no bullying from a weaker to a more powerful.
That's just being annoying. If you're weak and you're trying to be
What if
annoying,
there's lots of you? What if there's 5 nerds?
yeah,
Can they bully a jock
if
who's
they
by
can gain,
himself?
if they can gain power, for sure.
But so it would be a circumstantial power differential. They might not have it in normal general terms, but all of a sudden they may have a moment and they could bully then.
Are you thinking of the classic 80s comedy, Revenge of the Nerds?
That did pass in my head a little bit, yes, that as an illustration.
But that is the kids who are low in the social
Their
ladder.
fantasy, right?
It is, and a lot of these movies are made around that,
I
right?
understand.
Just like
Revenge.
there's a lot of old guy movies made around beating up people that in reality you never could.
Yeah. Well,
Bruce
so
Willis isn't
I
beating
was
anybody up in
asking-
real life, or Liam Neeson.
I was asking it for different reasons. I was going to ask it of you. The response you gave is what I was looking for, something like that. The reason I bring up Elijah was just to kind of help clarify.
Yeah.
But I actually had the question for a different reason.
Okay.
So having said what you said, which is helpful in what I was looking for, my question is going to be, but what about? Okay. What about when a culture has dominance?
Yeah.
Let's say, I want to pick one non-controversial so we can have, but I can't think of one off the top of my head, so I'm just going to pick the controversial one. The culture, and if it doesn't work, we'll do a different example. But the culture of America, let's say, was Bible-based for 200 some odd years. It's not so Bible-based now, right?
Indeed.
So there was a time, let's say, in which our culture said, look, if you are homosexual, that is bad, and you should feel shame. It's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're going to pursue that life, some might try to stamp it out and chase you down so you can't, but others basically say, don't let anybody see it.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So what they're doing as a culture, and this is going to get to my next point about pronouns, because I'm going to make a connection here, is they're leveraging their cultural hegemony or power
Yep.
to produce a shame for which they feel is a moral right.
Correct. Yeah.
Not a moral wrong, but a moral, not a right like I have a right, but it's a moral correctness.
Yeah, that's right. A moral
A
superiority.
righteous thing.
Yeah.
Yes. So if I use my moral hegemony that the culture okays, and I come to you for something that I think you're doing morally wrong. Now, there's obviously more gray areas, like you said, this family doesn't support church. You get into things where I want to be judgmental.
Yeah.
But let's just say it's a clear one, biblically like this. Is that bullying, or could it be of a similar dynamic?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't call it bullying necessarily. I think there's definitely, it does happen in both dynamics,
It's
right?
very similar. In that
Self-righteous behavior.
if I have a position of power and I'm making you feel bad, I might not be enjoying it like you were talking about with bullying,
Right.
but I'm exercising my power to put you, to help corral your behavior because I think what you're doing is not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very similar.
No, it is. And well, if you think of the social hierarchy, people who are socially in power, it doesn't necessarily mean they have, that they're president or their positions of power, but they can make you do things, right? That's what power is about. And so here's how I would say it. This is actually really connected to bullying in practice too, is that if you talk to bullies, if you talk to kids who actually pick on them, what they say is the kid who I'm picking on needs it. They deserve it and they need it. And the reason they need it, and there's a really strong social function to what they're doing. Because if you are the people who are in your life, in moments of crisis, you are going to have to rely on them, right? If this town floods,
They're weak. And
I have to go to the neighbor and say, I need your help. So that means I want the best neighbors. And this is intrinsic in us, right? We want the best, most reliable people closest to us, and the people who are going to lie, cheat, and steal, get them away, right? And that's the function of morality in society, is to say we can trust our neighbors. And so if I look at a kid and I say, this kid is overreacting to hardship, he's crying too easily, he's complaining, he wants his way, he's spoiled, I'm gonna teach him a lesson, right? And that's how that bullying dynamic justifies in the mind of the bully. Now there's also what the bully won't readily accept is there's a pleasure aspect to it as well. And that's the problem, right? But I think that same dynamic applies to pronoun use or to, if you say, well, I remember watching the Johnny Cash movie that came out so long ago, right? Joaquin Phoenix, great movie. And Reese Witherspoon's June Carter character is walking in a store and this woman says, shames her publicly that you got divorced, right? We're Christians, we don't do that.
Right.
And it's portrayed as this oh, how disgusting.
Yeah.
But
the shaming.
The shaming is disgusting. How dare you shame someone for their infidelity?
Right.
But now we're exactly in that same dynamic with roles reversed. That the libertine folks, right, the people who want you to do whatever you want, shame those who just say.
That's where I'm going.
That's right.
That's what's underlying where I'm going is the role reversal, because socially we have changed the morality that comes from theism and God, anchored God, has been abandoned by our culture. But now what I'm seeing is, and I'm calling it wokeism as a religious function, they're leveraging that hegemony in the same ways. So they're saying, you should be ashamed if you don't use the preferred pronoun of somebody you talk to. If a male wants to be called a female, and you don't agree with that, shame on you. And it almost begins to be in this dynamic of bullying, and so I'm just wondering if there's this fine line and distinction between activity of pressure that is bullying wrong, but very similar, not bullying and socially good, but then it can be even tweaked if it's not based on right morality.
So I think this is another example of accepting a false premise. And the premise is, what we were told growing up is you shouldn't enforce your morality, right? You can't legislate morality, which is nonsense. All legislation is based on morality. But what we were hearing and what we accepted, I think, too much of is to say we shouldn't enforce morality in a social setting, that we should be morally neutral to the people around us that we need to rely upon. The purpose of the Ten Commandments, the purpose of the law is not just that each individual would do good, but that you would have a community of people who do good so that you can trust each other and rely that someone's going to be there when I need them. They're not going to steal from me, right? And when I go to places around the world where that's broken down, I see it's missing so dramatically, right? I remember talking to a bunch of pastors in Africa explaining eBay, and that I can like see a picture on my phone, pay a stranger who I can't even see his face or his name, expect that he's going to give that object that I want to buy to another stranger who will bring it to me, right? And take a cut of the money, and then I'll receive the item and trust that the item that was in the picture is the real one, right? And it was mind-boggling to them. They don't even, I don't want to be too general about it, but for the most part, you don't even trust your family members with money. Right? Anywhere, ever. And so the fabric of trust in that society is broken. So that even if individuals are honest, they have to function in a dishonest.
And so in that context then, what I'm interpreting and hearing what you're saying is it would be beneficial for this, and we're going to put air quotes around bullying because we're dealing with something that...
Well, I want to call it enforcing morality.
Okay, and I was going to say the use of pressure. Of pressuring. There is a positive place for that stops short of the pleasure of being over you and diminishing you and feeling more powerful than you. When that is kept out of it, if there's a positive gain to pressure, to apply pressure, what I'm hearing you say is it's a legitimate thing and a good thing.
It's required for civilization. The other thing I see is when teachers don't enforce morality, which they're not, kids begin to enforce it more strictly among each other, so the bullying gets worse. Yeah,
because they don't have adult wisdom.
It's like I remember going and watching a soccer. I was watching a soccer match, right? The Timbers in Portland, and the refs weren't calling some blatant fouls, and it dawned on me that if this keeps up, there's going to be a fight, right? If those who are supposed to oversee and enforce morality don't do it, then people will take it upon themselves because otherwise they're not safe. And that is the result. Bad teachers create kids who are stressed out and because they're not safe.
Okay, then what about the component? You did the soccer thing. I went to the kid thing, you noticed, because when the kids enforce their own morality or make their own pressure systems, they don't have wisdom and they don't have experience and they don't have objectivity. It's a distorted, it's Lord of the Flies. But when you did the soccer one, we're assuming there's all these adults. What is the problem? Because that gets out of hand too, right? Why? Why does that get out of hand even though they're adults?
Well, because it's the same, it's just a role obligation. So in society, we say to the police, it's your job to make sure my neighbor obeys the law. So therefore I don't have to. But when the government is not fulfilling that role, now I have to start policing my neighbor. Now you get vigilantism, now you get more violence.
And the problem there is I'm not, as a neighbor in a neighborhood, I don't have this code of law that I'm constantly being drawn to. This is what I have to force. This is what I have to force. This is what I have to enforce. Now I start to enforce because they're not doing it, and it may start out with, they were stealing, but then it starts to get any grievance I have. Right.
But we have
it gets out of bounds.
We have this radar because long before it's stealing or bearing false witness or even the radar is like, why is their yard so messy? Right? Why is their car not clean? They're not orderly. And everybody has their own sort of comfort level around that based kind of on how we're raised and what our expectations
are. Whereas
a
police officer doesn't struggle with that as much because he's told, do these 27 laws. It's not your job to care if they're a slob or not.
Well, sort of.
Just if they steal.
But if you look at like in the 90s when Giuliani brought crime down in New York, what he said is enforce the tiny things.
I know.
Right? It's the broken window. That if there's a broken window, we fix it, and then otherwise people will break more windows.
That's right.
And so what a lot of policing was about for that era, and it's sort of
but
backing
were still
off.
Laws. It was enforcing the small ones.
But it's like HOA laws, right? We make a law that you can't have toys in the yard.
Yeah.
But if you get the toys out of the yard, because all of what that is it's a little indicator that there's chaos going on inside that house. And
So the
and chaos in the
slippery
house
slope, though,
is contagious.
As a neighbor, then I'm going to nitpick, and we all become little tyrants.
That's right.
That's our inclination.
And we don't want to become tyrants. It's exhausting. So you know what we do? We get tyrants to run the government.
Well, okay, this is where I'm going with the is bullying ever good? I had it right above the note, pronouns. Do you say them or not say them? And we'll connect it to this conversation. What do you think? Do you
on the internet?
Preferred pronouns. They say I prefer to be called this. As an individual citizen and as a Christian individual, what do you think?
One disclaimer is it's easy for me to give advice, but I don't work at like a bank where someone's going to come and HR is going to come visit me. So I have a lot more leeway. I also most of my employment is with people I'm connected with or the church. And so it's not an issue that comes up a lot.
You're not in a corporate setting, so we distinguish and answer.
I don't have a large external social construct around me, right? That being said, it was an issue that came up and got discussed when I was in public education. Mm-hmm. And I made it clear to my boss at the time I wasn't going to do it, right? When the kid shows up and the mom says, he's a she, I'm not going to call him a she. That's not, I'll call him his name, right?
Yeah.
And I won't be disrespectful, but I'm not going to lie.
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of where I am. And I made a person close to me was upset with me for that because they said it's being kind and polite to them. This is what they want.
Yeah. It's spoiling a child.
Well,
it's letting them have their way, even though it's not good for them.
But that's not how I approached it. I approached it, though I think it gets there. I approach it, it's not truthful. And that's not a helpful thing.
Yeah,
if you tell a lie to a kid, you think you're being nice to them, but you're hurting them, yourself, and the whole environment.
I heard a great story of a pastor. I think he was in Colorado, and he was at a gas station, and he saw a guy with a trans rights pin. It's got blue and pink stripes. But when he saw it, he thought it was a pro-life pin because the pro-life movement has some of the same, save babies, blue and pink. So he approached the guy like, I like your pin. But the guy was saying, I'm a she. and so the pastor was sort of caught off guard, and he says, you're not, man.
Yeah.
And he sort of actually spoke to him, and he said, like, God made you.
Yeah.
And God made you for a purpose, and he wants the best for you, and this isn't right.
Yeah.
And so then the employees at this chain gas station were offended on behalf of this dude, this trans individual.
Yeah.
Which is always how it goes, right?
Yeah,
the person's rarely offended. It's the defenders, right? The heroes.
Yeah.
Okay, so they made this thing. I think they called the police.
Yeah.
He misgendered this guy and banned him from the whole gas station chain, right? And it was in the news, this pastor, and I think the pastor might have even been running for local office.
Yeah.
And so it was like a big thing.
Yeah.
And he won the court, whatever.
Yeah.
He was still banned from that gas station because
So
a year later, the trans guy gets in touch with him and says, "Hey, dude, I really appreciate what you said. You were right."
Yeah.
And I don't think he had become a Christian, but he was getting himself together.
Yeah.
It was pretty incredible.
I read, the reason I put these two questions down, the bullying, it led me from the pronouns, because I read an article and a guy was trying to say that the demand for pronoun use, the extremes to which it has become, is frankly terrorism.
Okay,
it's hostage taking.
Tell me more.
And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to destroy you.
I mean, that's in the corporate level and a big job. That's definitely on the table.
So that's what's got me
to
thinking about terrorism, and what about Christianity, and what about bullying, because it's all kind of mixed together. Okay, hey, let's take a pause real quick. We want to recommend something. We're trying to do this regularly.
Trying.
I know, we're working on it. I wanted to recommend two things real quick. If you've never read the Babylon Bee, if you don't, how often do you take a peek at the Babylon Bee?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't actually read the Babylon Bee that much. I see their headlines because I follow them.
No, that's all I do too.
Yeah, but you know what I do is there's a sister website called Not the Bee.
Oh, I've never even heard of it.
And it's news stories that are so preposterous and yet true.
But they're true. Okay,
that they can't be. And that's actually where I get a fair amount of my news.
Here's what the Babylon Bee does: they make fake headlines.
Right.
And so I'm going to just read two of them here real quick. This is from just yesterday. Here's the headline. You have to. This is Babylon Bee, as if it's a newspaper article.
Right.
I'm going to have to do the Not the Bee because that's insane. McCarthy announces he has greenlit a probe to examine the possibility of investigating preliminary meetings into whether or not they should begin to consider the future likelihood of hypothetical impeachment hearings sometime later down the road.
That's great. That's great.
The other one that I thought was pretty funny.
We do need to talk about impeachment at some point today.
I know. I've got it on here.
Yeah.
Yes. Democrats say Republicans just using impeachment to try to get around rigged election system. And then I happened to see one this morning. Democrats scramble to find replacement for retiring Mitt Romney.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
what's funny is the Babylon Bee is famously Christian, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever watch when Elon Musk came and was on their podcast?
Yeah, I've seen them talk to him. I love how they talk to him. I was impressed by their boldness, courage, their engagement with him, their overt Christianity, but they're also giving him space as not where they are. I thought they did really well. The other thing I wanted to recommend real quick is if you've never read 1,000 Gifts. Have you read 1,000 Gifts? Heard of it?
I have, yeah.
Exceptional book on gratitude. Very thought-provoking. Excellent book. I would call it in the devotional category. 1,000 Good Gifts. She talks about basically what it does to you and what she did. She wrote down gifts as she saw them. I've done it. It changes you. It changes you so quickly. And she would keep a list. When she saw something, she'd write it down. And the goal was to write down
gifts.
1,000 things that she gave thanks to God for.
So it's what do you have that you have not received? Everything's a gift.
It could be lots of things. When I started doing it, some of the first things I wrote on, the sound of rain. You realize rain on a pavement or in a tree or even a roof, it's actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
And you just write it down, and there's an element of awe that takes place. I mean, I have this timer with sand. I love sand. I think there's something mesmerizing about this falling grains. It's beautiful.
And so the book is about what happened to her when she focused on
That's
that.
right. And why she did it, the word grace. That's where I didn't even realize the word grace, charis, has the word joy at its root.
So I was thinking about this. I actually heard a great sermon this week by Derek Prince. I've been going back. There's a YouTube channel with a bunch of his sermons from like the early 90s, late 80s. And it's fascinating as he talks about society degrading in 1989. And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
What's he thinking in heaven now? But he talked about grace and thankfulness. And his sermon was that if you want more grace from God, more gifts, more power present, right, to transform your heart and the hearts of people you love, you can't do it without thankfulness. They're intertwined, right?
Yeah.
And he was talking about all the Latin languages where the word grace and thanks are the same, right? Gracias.
Yes.
Yeah.
We give grace.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what this book is all about. So
cool.
That's our recommendation. All right, impeachment. Let's keep in mind the ground rules for the conversation are on second thought.
Okay.
Because otherwise we're just going to respond to what's happening.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit okay, but we want to, do we have any substantive things to say? So here's the question. What do you think? Should we do it? Should we not do it? What's your first gut thought about the impeachment? What's your first thought about it?
My first thought on everything going on in Congress lately is it's all for show and it's a waste of time. I'm not going to give it any attention. Then I went around, I listened to what I check in with Ben Shapiro about twice a year. I feel like
you put him on 1.2?
His whole show is just a reaction video. It's not really.
I know what
there's
you mean.
no second thought to it. It's just literally play clip, make a comment, play clip, make a comment.
I know.
See you next time.
What's the Fox guy? Hannity. He's the same way.
Yeah.
I began to realize
it's the recipe that works and gets you listeners.
Was so incredible in that he thought through and he had analysis.
He had a real picture. He had a real picture of what society should be like and how people work.
And I loved when he would have times and he'd give something and he would say, I've been thinking about this and here's what I think's really going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys that are big shows, they don't do that. It's so aggravating. And so
the best analysis I heard for it, I think.
Impeachment?
For impeachment.
Yeah.
Is what it does is it gives these Republicans who are part of the establishment, right? The uniparty, rhino, whatever you want to call them, that they're never going to vote for real change. They're never going to vote for Christian values. They're going to go along with whatever the chaos is, but they're going to talk the talk. They're going to say they're pro-life. They're going to say, right. Yeah. So what impeachment does is it gives them a venue, a very public venue, to go after these people and make it seem like they're the warriors for us against Biden. But then when it actually comes time to do something, because impeachment will do nothing.
Yeah.
Even if it'll be a show trial.
Senate, it'll be House
That's right.
only.
It won't remove Biden in any way. Correct. So it's just a stamp. Here's now every president gets impeached. Great.
Yep.
It does nothing for us.
Yeah.
So to that, I just say I'm not going to play the game.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like I didn't watch a minute of the Trump impeachments, however many there were. I don't even care.
Of the actual charges in the House before
Yeah,
the
all
Senate.
the
I didn't watch any of
testimony.
that
It was like,
either.
what a waste of time.
Did you
And this
watch
will
any
be
of the
exactly the
Kavanaugh
same.
stuff?
A little bit.
Okay, so I watched the Blasey Ford interviews
Yeah.
before the House or Senate, I guess. Mm-hmm. I watched it. That's the only thing I did that day.
Better than
Anyway.
golf, huh? Wow.
Anyway, okay, yeah, impeachment. So I have a yes, no, and my answer is going to be tie into some other topics we've been having. I say yes as a citizen. I saw an article that said it's about wrongs, not revenge, and I say baloney. It's about wrongs and revenge.
Okay.
From a political perspective, politics is the issue of power. It's the use of the sword. And compromise is when you have a limitation to your power and you have to. Some people call politics the art of compromise, but it's the display of power for supposedly, hopefully, a common good.
Yeah.
And in the display of power from the left, from a political perspective, what they did to Trump, they hamstrung him with the Russia stuff, then the impeachment over the Ukraine call, and then the post-impeachment over the January 6th stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was all theater, but it has an effectiveness. And so I think that it's legitimate. I do believe that there is corruption. I think the Biden family has been, but so has Mitch McConnell, has been using China and Ukraine to line their own pockets. But
Yeah.
I think McConnell, Peter Schweizer, I don't know.
know.
He has written several books exposing corruption on both sides, basically. The Clinton cash machine, the people with China, McConnell, as well as Biden.
The stuff we heard about the Clinton Foundation was, legendary.
Yeah. But all that stuff is, I think Biden and his family are guilty of all of that. So there's wrongs. I also think it's legitimate from a revenge perspective. That force and power is the only language that, especially the left, but it's really the language of politics. So as a citizen, I say yes.
So in revenge, you're sort of going down the mutually assured destruction.
Yes, that's right.
That if you're going to go this far, so are
If
we.
you don't, then you tell the other side, we'll never be as bad as you.
Yeah.
And so go ahead and do your worst, and
Well,
you'll
this
win.
is where
It will
I
pay.
struggle, right? Because we all, and conservatives in particular, because we look to the past for ideals, to say, well, I wish it was, civilized discourse. So therefore, I'm going to act as if it's civilized discourse.
Yeah.
It's like showing up to the wrong kind of football match and getting pummeled when they've got helmets and you don't.
Yeah, it's the knife to a gunfight thing.
That's right.
So, however, my answer differs as a Christian. Now, and I'm not in the position in which I have a political responsibility, so my citizen life and my Christian life don't have to commingle for something I have to give an account to, other than voting and a couple things.
I'm talking too much about it.
Yes, that's right. But as a Christian, I actually don't think it's not, unless they have real proof that they can actually do, unless they have incontrovertible proof that they can remove somebody, it is political show. I now believe, I agreed with the impeachments of Clinton at the time. I was a young man, though.
Yep.
And I look back and think I was in error. Not that he didn't do wrong, and not that he didn't lie, but it created a show that ended up harming the country more than it helped the country. There were probably other ways to hold him accountable for the behavior that was corrupt behavior than doing that card. And I think it turned out to be a poor thing. And I think it has led to, it was Agnew that was impeached, right?
I don't know.
Nixon was not impeached. He was threatened to.
Yeah. He resigned.
He resigned
in face of impeachment. Yeah.
I believe his vice president before that, Agnew, had actually legitimately been impeached, if I remember correctly. And I don't remember if it passed the Senate or not, but there's never actually been an impeachment that passed the Senate. The problem is it has to be so glaring, right?
Which is why I think of all the things people have been impeached for, this stuff with Biden is, to me, the most glaring. Like millions
I'm
of dollars
agreeing with
funneled.
you, but
right.
the difficulty is to be able to show that. Biden's snarky comment several weeks ago was, so where's the money now? Because you can't show it.
Well, and how do you give my son a job? He lives in my house. He pays my bills. Is it a bribe to him or a bribe to me? It's all the same.
Yeah. So, all right. Anything else on impeachment?
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought that far back, but it is, when you say it, really clear that it all started with Clinton, right? That the impeachment with Clinton, because it was this funny, like, okay, there's some perjury there, and I can see that.
I actually think it started with Nixon. I think that Clinton was a response to Nixon.
Nixon broke. It's a long jump, though.
The people that did with Clinton were people engaged with the Nixon. There were people that they were still alive and involved. It was an element of revenge for that.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's nutty.
Well, and if anything, people who are seeking positions of power have long memories.
Yes, that's right.
We're going to make you pay later.
That's right. Yeah.
And I heard
we're talking 50, 60 years of these people there.
Yeah.
So that's what it goes back to. By the way, speaking of that institutional memory piece, I don't remember if I asked it or if you gave your thought. Assassination of Trump. Did you ever say what you thought?
Do I think he will be?
Yeah.
I actually went back and watched that clip. The Portnoy one where he's talking about assassination. We talked about it.
Oh, you watched Tucker?
Yeah, I didn't say much about it. But what's interesting looking at the clip was he was going through the steps of clear escalation, right?
That's right. Tucker
right.
was.
So we're going to undermine you. We're going to lie about you.
Yep.
Now we're gonna indict you, or now we're going to impeach you. Now we're going to indict you. It's like they're working their way up
then they
to
had
assassination.
An arrest and a mugshot, trials.
But what I think too is, if you watch how the discourse is going between the left and the right in America, it's going on the same trajectory, where it's an escalating intensity to the point of, we're going to arrest your followers, right? We're going to arrest the people that are supporting you for clear political reasons. And so now and that's why you're cementing, when you arrest Trump, but you also arrest, guys who weren't even at J6 but were part of it, right? And you arrest pro-life demonstrators, and you arrest, and not just arrest, but sentence to years in federal prison, right? Some of these pro-life
22
people.
years for the Proud Boy leader who was not even in the Capitol.
But pro-life demonstrators, there's some obscure federal crime that says if you block entrance, and it's
sidewalk.
like, oh, they were just out there saying don't kill your babies, and now they're going to spend, I don't know how many years, significant sentences. So what you're cementing is that there's a group of people who stand for this moral frame, who said Trump represents us even deeper, because they're arresting all of us, and look, they're arresting Trump. And so as Trump goes, so we go. Even though Trump, I think Trump appreciates that, but whether he actually follows or cares about what the, J6ers are in prison.
That gets me to the question here, why is Trump supported? Because I think that is a very real, I just read an article, Mark Stein, good article. I'm going to bring up some of his other points at another time. But he made just offhand comment about why he thinks Trump has the support he has today, because there are some things that have changed from 2016 and 2020. And yet there's a support levels that have not gone down. And his posture is that part of it is, I don't care, because they're doing all these arrests and tyrannical things, I want him because it's precisely a poke against that.
Okay.
Not necessarily to lead our country, not necessarily because I support everything it does. In fact, there's a lot of people supporting him that do not like what he initiated, why he did not get rid of Fauci right off the bat, or Bixby, or all these things that they think, I don't agree. And his whole he gets booed when he brings up, he's changing his tune right now about vaccines.
He is.
Because he has to. Because his base that supports him does not agree with him. But they support him anyways. And Stein is saying, why?
Yeah.
And he's saying it's because Trump is the provocative person to stick it to the elite people.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth in that.
And it's so fascinating too. I totally agree with that. It's fascinating too, because the more I think about it, the more it feels like the Democrats of the 80s, who are like, we're on the side of the factory workers, and the migrants in the fields, and
it has flipped,
right? And what's happened, I think, the reason it flipped, as far as I can tell, is that the corporations went to the Democrats and said, we got you if you got us, and joined forces.
Yes,
which is where that elite mentality comes from.
There was something happened, and I don't know enough about it. I'd like to learn a little more about how corporate America got on board. And my working theory so far is it's this woke question I've been wrestling with as a religious. I believe wokeism is an expression of secular religion in America.
Yeah.
But I'm actually fiddling with this idea, is woke the same as the elites? And I don't think so. I think the people in power are using woke to establish their power.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But the wokeism is an expression, and I think the corporate entities have said, hey, this is the way to make money. And the biggest way to get money in our country today is to be on the side of the American government and to get contracts.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Especially
so-
as the federal government grows.
That's right.
All right, so this actually, I had a thought about this week. So I was listening to a marketing guy talk about niche marketing, and that's all the rage, right? If you want to start a business or you want to make have a runaway success, in the past, before the internet, really, you have to be able to provide service to a broad interest group because geographically you're limited to the people who can come to your store.
Yeah.
Right. So I gotta
You work
please
in Salem.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so now, because of the internet, I can get really down to like people who like this particular shade of this color of that thing
Yeah.
and sell only to them because even though it's less than 1% of the population,
You can market to Trekkies.
it's 1% of a billion people, so you
Trekkies
can
only.
still get rich.
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
So politics has become that too.
Yes, I think
We're going to
that's
divide people up into categories. And so, and I've heard it tracked back to Occupy Wall Street. And that if you look at the word racism, its use in news it's like 2009 during Occupy Wall Street, it just spiked. That there was a concerted effort to say, we're going to bring up racism, we're going to make it the issue. And that group of people on Occupy Wall Street were divided up, right?
Makes me want to go down the Obama path questions.
No,
when you
it
say
does.
2000,
It
but I
does,
don't
because
want it
Obama
right now.
used that similar thing of like, it's all about racism. If you don't like me, it's because you don't like black people.
Yeah. One more comment on the impeachment and corruption and tyranny things. Did you see the comments of Putin, the interview he gave?
No.
He said, America has been corrupt. Look what they're doing to Trump. It's clearly political persecution.
Yeah.
And all these things that, and his external point was, America no longer has a moral foundation to tell the rest of the world what's good and bad.
Well, that's clearly true.
And that is clearly true. But my question then is, why say this?
Why does he say it? Well,
Why
he wants to
say
divide
this
and conquer
out
too. Because America is the source of all his issues.
Okay.
I mean,
so
through NATO.
Does he knows how this is going to play, right?
Yep.
You see, Trump and Putin are best buddies.
That's right.
And right now the conventional thing, Tucker aside, and is that Putin is evil and Ukraine is good, and all of America should get behind and send, I don't know, we're at over $100 billion to Ukraine so that our other politicians get a bunch of their money back.
Speaking again, that reminds me of the switch we were talking about. There's a courthouse in Corvallis where I grew up, and all through college and onward, and actually even before that, there was anti-war protesters in old Volkswagen vans would stand on this main thoroughfare outside the courthouse with signs, and it was like all the time. There's this old retired guy. He was just out there. You know what their signs say now?
No.
Pro-war in Ukraine.
Isn't that nutty?
It was literally from stop the wars in the Middle East to start wars in the Eastern Europe.
Yes, that is a worthy of an on second thought. What is that's going on? If I'm going to stab from the hip here or shoot from the hip, it's going to be that there are spirits, there is an underlying reality behind it that we would like to look for logical consistency. We see logical inconsistency. We want to say, well, you're not being, but we might be missing the point there.
I think it actually connects back to the idolatry thing. Because I see such a stark change in people's attitude about government when their guy becomes president. Suddenly, when my guy's president, the IRS is not so bad. The Army's doing great, right? All of these institutions, even though we clearly see them overrun by ideological infiltration, right? Communists taking over. Trump's the president, so maybe that everything's all right for a little while, right? And the reverse is true. And it's sort of like, I think again of that, like the president is like my stepdad, right? He's the guy who's going to protect us and look out for us and give us good gifts on Christmas because it's just such a mess.
Yeah.
It's the thinking of people who need to be ruled. That's what I would say.
Yes,
Right?
that
Who
ties
want
in.
to be ruled.
We have lost our capacity, in my opinion, for self-government. And I'm not sure when it happened, but we do not think as a self-governing people anymore.
We don't
think
even.
as a
I don't
rule.
think if you ask people, I don't think they would even realize that we are.
I agree with you completely.
It's gone.
Okay, Christian nationalism. We've talked about the last two episodes. I suggest that you've got some notes down here. I've got some notes, but we're at our
We're past an
time,
hour,
and
yeah.
I think we're going to take a break this episode for that.
I agree.
We'll bring it up again. Let's end with one last question here. You take your pick. Either finding rest in heaven or voting for delayed gratification, whatever you think best, and this will be our end point.
All right. I mean, we've talked a lot about voting.
I know. I just wondered if it was in line and easy to add, or if it's a new direction.
Well, it was keying off that
can do them both
conversation
if it's
we had
fast.
the other day about what heaven's going to be like.
Oh,
and
these
it
are
was sort of
connected?
joking. You remember that joking conversation we had with Darren?
I do.
Yeah. So just thinking of like heaven, heaven to us is the destination. That's not really true, right? The question I had in that conversation was, just like the demons are these disembodied spirits, right? And at times they express a longing, even to be in an animal would be better than to have nothing.
There's those weird passages.
Yeah, and
Send us
so
into the pigs.
send us into the pigs. But in heaven, even though it's rest and it's bliss, it's paradise, there is a disembodied nature to the people who are up there.
right now.
Our loved ones in heaven
It's called the intermediate
have
state.
no body. Their
Yes, that's
bodies
right.
will be
That's right.
restored at the
spirits
second coming.
In the Hebrews, the spirits of just men made perfect is what they are.
So if
They're
heaven
at
is
Mount
rest,
Zion.
right? It's freedom from toil, it's freedom from the curse and corruption, and yet it would seem, or I wonder, I don't know, I don't have a clear answer on this. I wonder if there's still a longing there, an unfulfilled longing.
So wait, I think you have to make this is my first thought on that. You have to make a distinction when you say heaven between what is right now versus what is the eternal perspective we have on heaven.
Because heaven, as we think of it, right, in the clouds, is not the final destination of mankind.
Well, what is taking place right now? I know we say they've gone to heaven, but that's actually not heaven in the biblical term of what comes down when the city of Jerusalem, Revelation 22, so to speak, comes down, and the bride. I see the bride, and here's a city.
Yeah, he's coming
and
on the
final
clouds.
resting places between God and man, and all this language that has been since Genesis and worked its way through the prophets and stuff, is picked back up about the dwelling of God is with man. That, as we call it, heaven,
Yeah.
is not yet. A form of that, when our loved one passes away as a believer, they go to be with God. They're in some form of that, but that's why they call it an intermediate state. It's not yet what it's intended to be.
So heaven and earth are currently divided,
They are
right?
divided.
That the will of God in heaven doesn't fully
partially
happen on
overlapped
earth.
because of the cross, but not fully overlapped that is being pictured in Revelation 22. So when you
Yeah.
say heaven and is there rest and is not yet satisfied, I agree completely. In the intermediate state right now, the people in heaven are not in its final form, and they lack the satisfaction that will still be theirs when we all share it together.
And that makes sense too, because I think of heaven as the place where all your desires, all holy desires are
Yeah,
satisfied.
that's right.
But thinking to parts of Revelation where the martyrs are crying out, "How long?"
That's what I was just going
right?
to say that.
It's like they're
Under
longing
the-
for more,
It's
even
not
though they're
over
with
yet.
him. Yeah.
So the spirits of just men made perfect, they experience this element of their spiritual existence having been sin removed, and they're perfected.
Yeah.
But they're not yet united to their body, and the judge has not yet lifted the curse and sent it off into the new age.
Right.
Hasn't
Yeah.
happened yet. So is that your thing on finding rest in heaven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That was interesting. I didn't think that's where you were going to go. See, I thought you were going to go in the direction of if rest is in heaven, this is what I think about. Rest being not a cessation of work.
Correct.
Rest
There's good
as
work.
being an enjoyment of what God intended to be, and it's completely consistent with working.
Right.
And so that when God rests on the seventh day, it says he sanctified it or blessed it. The idea is there not just that he ceased from work, that's a part of it, but the other idea is he looked at it and said, this is good.
Yeah.
And he has delight in his, so to speak, eyes. That's the rest. He's enjoying what he did. And he's going to go do some more, so to speak. I
Yeah.
mean, not that he creates more, I don't mean it that way. But we think of the idea of rest is, I don't have to work anymore. And I think that's a mistake. I think and so the question
So
came up, will we
rest
work in
is-
heaven? Totally we will work in heaven.
Yeah. And for ages to come. Right.
Oh, for
yeah.
eternity we're going to work, I think.
Yeah. And it's a work free of toil.
Yes, that's a good way
right.
to put it.
Yeah.
Free of toil, or the Genesis will be the sweat of the brow, the vanity of it not doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of symbolism in the Bible, even if you look at like the robes that the priests wear, so that are linen and light, so that they wouldn't sweat, to show that in the presence of God, it's not labor. God
Yeah.
does the work.
Yeah.
So does that mean, just thinking about this, right? The idea I've heard people talk about is that God is still at rest, right? He's still on his Sabbath that began in creation. I don't know if that's true, but part of what builds into that is that Sabbath rest, if heaven is Sabbath, is an eternal Sabbath, it implies that that's part of the idea that work is corrupted, when in fact it's not.
Wait a minute. Say that again.
Okay, so God creates for 6 days
Okay.
without corruption. He
Okay.
looks on it all and says, it's
That's
very
right.
good.
Yeah.
And yet he still rests.
Yes. Oh, I see what you're saying.
So I'm saying the work, even though it was good work and pure and not toil,
Yes.
it still
Yes,
means
that's
rest is
right.
important. So in heaven,
false-
there's a rest, but there's also a work. And that cycle of healthy work and
to
rest.
say what I think you're saying is that when we kind of tend to think that rest is because of the toil part of work.
Well, I
And
think
that's
that's where
true,
we intertwine it. That's
but
where we say,
it's
oh,
not-
God rested and
It's
heaven
not
is
necessary.
rest.
Yeah.
Right? You've gone to your eternal rest.
That's right.
Rest in peace.
That's right.
But it's not just eternal Sabbath.
Yes.
It's eternal Sabbath, but also eternal work. You're going to go back and forth.
Yeah.
Because even when the toil is removed, you still need rest from your work.
Yes.
If the creation
If the
model
curse
is a
removed
good
even,
example.
and the toil and
Yeah.
the sweat of the brow, all the bad things are taken away, we will still labor and rest from those labors, but the labor itself will also be rest.
Okay. Now I'm going to have to think on that one.
Well, I think only because heaven is viewed as its entirety as one of rest. We've
Yeah.
entered into our rest, but I think we're going to work. So I think when we are in the next Ionios, the next age,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we will labor to build the creation as God intended, and it will be rest. And when we labor, we will have seasons of rest even then. We will have bodies and we will have spirits. I think we'll even sleep.
I wonder
personally.
if in heaven, part of the longing is that they can't get to work yet. Because Jesus is still wrapping it up. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And that's sort of like, we're in heaven, but we want this thing reunited so we can get to work.
And you know what? My first thought when you said that was no, because it says how long. There's injustice they're seeing.
Yeah, that's
and yet
true.
Your point is the injustice being removed is so that we can live now.
Yeah, and even creation is longing, right? That there's
Yeah.
this corruption even
Groaning.
in
Yes, exactly.
matter.
Yeah,
In matter,
that's right.
in time, in space. Something's not right.
Yeah.
And when it's made right, man, what do we be able to do?
I agree. Somebody said to me the other day, we'll end with this. They said, oh, they were with their dog. And they said they were looking up at the stars and saying to their dog, look at the stars. And they said their dog can't worship like I can. And I agree with that. But I also would propose an alternative view is that the dog is able to worship according to its nature. And
You can't
even-
worship like the dog can.
That's right.
Yeah.
And trees and rocks. If the humanity would not cry out, Jesus is saying there's this strange sense and says even they would cry out because there is something even in inorganic nature that would worship in God and praise God according to its nature. And that's
Yeah.
what the creation is groaning to be liberated so it can exult fully in what it was meant to be.
So Jesus is saying that rocks are alive. Is that what you're saying?
In some, yes, but not as a scientific way that we would think of life.
Well, yeah.
But yes, in some way, I do think that.
There's a lot
in
to science we
fact,
don't understand.
If you want to do the science route, vibration, inorganic matter, and the vibrational frequencies of what we would say would be stone, is that not living? There's movement,
Yeah, we'll have to.
and the atoms.
It's an interesting topic because it's there's a lot of mysticism around that too.
Yeah.
And that,
Okay.
that language.
Good show. That's it. Listen to us. We've come to the end here. All the sand, the bottom of the hourglass.
There you go.
You've been listening to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke. If you enjoyed this podcast and found something to reconsider, perhaps something you've never thought about, here's what you can do. You can do us a favor and click the like button on your screen, but then even more important, go find a friend and start a good discussion. Truth is freedom. Cheers.